I think you should also, in light of the transition, one of the biggest debates is the energy industry. The fossil fuel industry is one of the largest employers and one of the greatest sources of GDP. One of the greatest challenges to the energy transition is that what will happen to that entire labor force, because it's quite labor intensive. And that's been a major challenge for renewables. So keep these things in mind, that one of the challenges to the transition is that they will need to upskill or reskill or just generally do away with a lot of the labor force that works in the fossil fuel industry. But longer term, there are studies that show that renewables will generate greater benefits to society and economic benefits that will lead to the opening up of other opportunities. But the immediate problem is that is one of the biggest debates. Do you have a question, Mekdes? Yes.
No, it's not a question, but because also there's a lot of employment issues and supply of labor. There might be an issue like minimum wage and bad working conditions in this industry.
Very good point. Then comes the energy mining complex, and I've deliberately put that image, but that's not what the energy mining complex is all about. If you do a bit of research on the energy mining complex, it's almost like the water, energy, and food nexus. The mining industry is one of the highest energy consuming sectors in the world. This is a problem in many countries. If you look at Canada, Australia, South Africa, and even smaller countries like Niger, Namibia, Botswana, you'll find that energy is prioritized to go to the mines. And in a country like Niger, it's quite insidious, because as of a few years ago, they had only two power plants. I've told you this before. And one power plant was exclusively serving the uranium mine. And so the demand for energy from the mining sector is extremely high. But vice versa, can energy, because we're not saying that mining is a terrible thing, but we are saying what are the environmental impacts? What are the social impacts? What are the political impacts and economic impacts? And how do they interact? We also have huge problems in mining. We've looked at gender, we've looked at working conditions, and there's that picture right there. We know in many mining communities, there's child labor, so we have human rights concerns. What other things can you think of? You know, I've given you a lot of the answers because the energy today in the room, you're a little low energy. I'm not sure how the previous class was, but people look a little sad. Oh, it's holiday blues. So does anyone have anything to say about the energy mining complex? Yes, please.
So what usually I believe, or as far as I've done, that mining complexes usually employ seasonal laborers, and these laborers are usually, they migrate with their entire family, and that's also the primarily the reason that the entire family resides there and have to utilize the limited resources present in these mining complexes. So even if the man who might do the labor intensive work, even if the family stays back, might still face the harmful effects of staying in a mining complex.
Yes, so there's something else I want you to consider when it comes to mines, and I'd like you to do a bit of research. Please look at mining towns or mining communities. You see, mines are about depleted or depletable resources. Please have a look at former coal mining societies or any mining societies where the resource itself has depleted, and they live in absolute squalor because a lot of the focus goes to the mine itself. So the infrastructure, the rail, the roads are not serving the communities around the mines, they're serving the mine, including the community. When the resource runs out, you have some of the poorest. In fact, just use a country like the US. If you look at communities that lived in former coal mining centers, they live worse than you can imagine, worse than even you can imagine in this country. So remember, one of the problems with fossil fuels is not just the climate change problem, is that these are depletable resources. They do run out. And when they run out, the impacts are extraordinary. And the trouble with the energy mining complex, because the mines have such a high energy demand, they therefore pay for the energy. There's therefore an incentive to simply serve those societies. We have blackouts in South Africa, I've told you, and it's called Eskom. But I assure you, the mining industry is not getting blackouts. They would rather prioritize the mines than even hospitals. So when you think of this complex, it's also a question of how these things function and if energy is a commodity. And beyond just the energy aspects, what are the societal impacts of depletable resources being the main focus of an energy system? So energy and health, and then now it'll be your turn to speak. So some of you will need to stand up and come to the front and do what I'm doing, try and tease things out of people. So I can see you struggling to see this. Energy has a profound impact on health. So what are the health impacts of, it says they're energy choices, but sometimes many societies or people or communities or stakeholders have no choice. But energy and health. Remember, this is the energy cycle. So at every level, we have those impacts. There's environmental disruption at extraction. We have environmental disruption at transportation. The transport sector is one of the largest emitters. And for those who are not aware, the maritime industry, about 75% of global cargo, basically transportation, happens by sea. And the maritime industry is one of the most carbon intensive. There are very few vessels that use any form of renewable energy or nuclear energy. Most of them use fossil fuels. So there are emissions in terms of transportation. We have other emissions, from land and water. We have water consumption, which we've already spoke about. We're talking about use of land and waterways. So in order to do these things, even for renewable energy, you need land. If you're talking about solar panels cover huge land surfaces. And that's why there needs to be some form of innovation in terms of rooftop solar, rather than taking what would be arable land to place solar panels. So there's land use and waterways. And of course, there's quality and availability of water, which we've spoken about. There's climate active pollutants, not just outdoor, but indoor. We have health damaging pollutants. And what are the health outcomes? We have reduced life expectancy, and this is easy to see. Please just have a look at what the life expectancy was during the Industrial Revolution. Many people did not see past their 30s. We have quality of life. If you constantly have problems, and if you look at what they call the black lung problem around mines, the quality of life, if you have poor health, is just horrendous. And this goes beyond energy systems. You would rather have good health than be a millionaire. I mean, I had a client once who had quite a bit of money. And I think I told you this. I mean, my boss would offer tea and bananas to all clients who came in. He was a strange man. And the client accepted the tea. And we got on, and I was sat there, and he said, "Ted, I can't have this banana. I love bananas, but I can't eat this one. I have a pacemaker and I'm diabetic. What use are my billions if I can't eat a banana when I want one?" So there are far-reaching impacts that cannot be compensated by money if one's health is damaged. So we have quality of life, we have physical, mental, and other forms of health. One of the biggest tragedies that I witnessed in South African townships is single parent homes, and usually just mothers because most of the men were out in the mines, and when mines close, they have no other skill or no other form of education. So you'll find in many townships, a lot of the men are given to drink. And what are the family impacts of this? When you start making the connections, and I say this because very close friends of mine are born and bred there, and I think of their families, and it's incredible just the kind of mental health challenges that they have and the kind of societal problems that they have. And if you look at, say, the gender movement or the feminist movement in places like South Africa, we have some of the strongest women on earth, because for about 300 or 400 years, their men have been carted away to the mines and they've had to fend for themselves. Now, the fact that the women are empowered does not mean, first, the fact that women are agitating for their rights does not mean that they're empowered. And the fact that they're empowered does not mean that that society functions optimally. So there are serious mental health and health equity challenges that can be traceable to energy systems or energy choices, either at policy level or at economic level or at society level, can actually enhance those things. So instead of thinking just negatively, if you reduce the emissions, it means you have higher life expectancy, higher quality of life, better physical health, and so on.